Okay, happy Tuesday, everyone. It is 4 minutes to 10 o'clock, so we will be starting today's Impact Tuesdays featuring the ADVA Center in just a few minutes. So go ahead and get settled in, and I will see you shortly. Okay, so it is exactly 10 o'clock. So we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for today's Impact Tuesday. I am Jennifer Krishka, CEO of the Jewish Women's Foundation of the Greater Palm Beaches. We are dedicated to creating social change for women and girls in the United States and in Israel. So today we are joined by Dr. Yael Hasson. She is from ADVA Center based in Israel, and she is the Director of Gender Equality. So thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, of course.
I'm excited to be here with you.
We are excited to talk to you. We've been funding ADVA Center for several years now. So why don't we start with talking about what ADVA Center does, just overall, and then we can get maybe more into the gender-specific work that the organization does.
Okay. So thanks again for inviting me. And sorry for my non-perfect English. It's not my mother tongue. I hope you still would be able to understand me.
Yes, you're doing great.
Okay, so ADVA Center, maybe I should tell you that I joined the ADVA Center 16 years ago. I work as a researcher in ADVA, focusing mainly on economic and social policies from a gender perspective. And during my years in ADVA, our gender work has been developed and grew in so many aspects that it is now about half of our work. So just few words about ADVA Center. ADVA Center is Israel's leading progressive, what we love to call think and do tank. Our mission is to increase equality of opportunity and social justice for all groups composing the Israeli society, with a special emphasis on women and girls. We combine policy analysis, advocacy, popular education, and community action work. Our, what's unique in our activities that they are both top-down and bottom-up. We work directly with government, ministries, and local authorities, and we work with dozens of groups of residents around the country, most of them women's groups. That's in general.
Okay.
So now you might want to ask me about our gender work or what?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about the work you're doing on gender and exactly like what that looks like to be doing, policy analysis.
Yeah. So about 20 years ago, the ADVA Center introduced in Israel the strategy of gender responsive budgeting. It's a gender analysis of public budgets, policies, and economic decisions. This strategy is based on the assumption that budgets simply are not neutral. Budgets reflect agendas, priorities, political divisions of power, both in the central and the local government. And since women and men have different responsibilities and are located in different positions in the society and the economy, any budget decision will therefore affect men and women differently.
Mm-hmm.
So gender analysis of the budget or of economic decisions
Mm-hmm.
makes it possible to understand how the revenues and expenditures impact the status and opportunities of women and men from different social groups. And it makes it possible to determine to what extent the national or local policy affects diverse groups of men and women as services consumers, as infrastructure users, as taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an approach that based on a deep understanding of women's and men's priority and needs. And then you must think, but what exactly it means
Right.
to mainstream gender into a public policy or budget. I mean, what it means.
Right.
So one of my favorite examples is public transport. I love this example because it's a service that seems neutral to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then one simple exercise is to think about the ways that women and men use public transport. And in each and every country that issue was examined,
Mm-hmm.
three patterns were found. First, women use public transport more than men.
Okay.
We found it also in Israel. 60% of the users of public transport are women.
Mm.
They use it at different hours and for different purposes. And more women than men depend on public transport to get to work. Okay? So studies attribute the differences in travel patterns to the division of roles in the labor market and the families. But when you take a look at those patterns, you see that women, compared with men, women take more trips per day, but travel shorter distances. About 33% of the women in Israel work in part-time jobs, therefore they finish earlier.
Okay.
And they're more likely to travel during off-peak hours when service is less frequent. They tend to collect children more often and run more errands. In addition, we found, and in many other places found the same, that women are less willing to use public transport after dark because they feel less safe.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to focus on this issue, and following our research and our advocacy, the Ministry of Transport in
Mhm.
Israel conducted for the first time a gender-based survey about patterns of commuting.
Mhm.
And this survey showed that women are 60% of users of public transportation, but yet bus routes and the definition of rush hours are tailored by men patterns of work.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is one example. And after doing this kind of advocacy about this issue, today one achievement, it's maybe a small one, but still it's achievement. A planning of a new bus lines includes more buses at noon when many parents pick up their children. So the awareness
Mhm.
have rose, have risen. So, but I want, this was an example of how we take infrastructure or planning issue and work on it with the national government, with the national level. But when we took this very same issue to our community work, because we do also community work,
Mhm. You mean
a group,
on like a local level?
like on the local level with
Okay.
residents. So a group of women in Rehovot, which is a city in the center of Israel, took our training course and learned how to mainstream gender into local policy. And they decided to map public transportation and community needs. And
Mhm.
they showed exactly what we saw at the national level. I mean, they showed a lack of easy bus access to main health services, workplaces, educational institutions, and public services. And they also conducted a survey asking women residents about their needs. And following this process, they submitted a position paper to the mayor.
Mhm.
As a result, the municipality allocated funds for an additional bus line, one that meets the residents' needs. Okay, so we took,
That's amazing.
just to reflect how we take issue from the national level to the local level, and
Mhm.
we can work on the same issue from at the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach.
Mhm. I mean, it's pretty amazing that the government in Israel is so responsive, to when you have these results. So,
Well, it's not always responsive. It takes many years to achieve this kind of response. I mean, it took us many years from the beginning of working on the issue of public transport until the ministry actually conducted the survey and
Mhm.
did something about it. So it's a work for the long run. It's a
Sure.
marathon. Yeah.
So how do you decide, I guess, like what kind of issues you're going to tackle? Like what areas of infrastructure or planning you are going to do some kind of survey or analysis? Like, does the municipalities come to you, or does ADVA Center, decide like here are some issues that we want to look at and then go to the government?
Well, it depends. In some of the cases, we learn from other countries. We are part of the European Gender Budgeting network, and we follow what they do in their countries, in Europe. What issues are the most important issues for them? That's one example. But
Mhm.
sometimes it is the municipality that came out with an idea and ask us to help her with it. I mean, lately, a recent project that we did together with the city of Tel Aviv. The city of Tel Aviv started last year to conduct gender analysis of its budget lines.
Mhm.
It is just the beginning, and very few lines are, they conduct a gender analysis of very few lines, but they found, for example, and it's very well connected to the public transportation issue, that women use the city bikes much less than men do.
Okay.
Okay? Um, and since Tel Aviv tends to be a greener city and therefore wants to encourage its residents
Mhm.
to use a more sustainable transport, we are now working with city officials to try and understand the obstacles that prevent from women to use the bikes. Okay, so sometimes it's something that come out of the budget analysis. I mean, they count how many women and how many men use the city bikes, and then they decided it is surprising and let's do something about it. And we are continuing with the analysis.
So what does that look like? I guess like on the logistical level, what does it look like to actually conduct some kind of like policy or like a budget analysis? Like what goes into that?
Maybe, I mean, it look at the moment, maybe let's go back, okay? and then I answer it
Sure.
exactly. We started analyzing the budget and policy, and we started analyzing economic decision and budget 20 years ago. So what we did is to take, we still do it. We take major budget lines from the budget proposal annually, and we show how it impacts differently men and women. For example, during the years, we show that the many cutbacks in the budgets of government ministries have clear gender implication, because first because women comprise 65% of all civil servants. Therefore, the cutbacks primarily harm women employees. Second, women are bigger consumers of social services, for example, health services and welfare services. So cutting back those services harm women as consumers. And finally, every reduction in public services increases the burden on working women, on whom the responsibility falls for family members who need care, because women are still the primary caretakers of women children in our society. I'm just saying that this analysis is so relevant these days when the government plans strategies to deal with the economic implications of the coronavirus pandemic. Who is being compensated? Where is the money come from? Who is paying for it? I just read the Minister of Finance says that he is going to cut public servants' salaries. Who are these workers? Okay, so these are the kind of questions we ask and analyze, because we think the government needs to make its decisions based on understanding of the different implications on women and men.
Sure.
So one of our major accomplishments on this issue is the Israeli government adaptation of gender auditing into the national budget. Our years of efforts, together with other organizations, not alone, to promote gender budgeting, resulted in government resolution from 2014, which requires all government ministries to conduct gender auditing of their budgets and present the audit in their budget book. So now when you open the budget book, the budget proposal of any of those ministries, government ministries, you will see a chapter that's called a gender analysis of the budget. Okay, so this is how it looks like for your.
That's amazing. That's really amazing that Israel does that.
Yeah, but I have to say it's not perfect. Okay, I mean,
sure.
They present their analysis. It's not perfect. We still have a lot of work to do. Not all of the ministries, most of them do not set a new agenda based on the analysis. Okay, just an analysis.
Okay.
But still, the gaps are more transparent. There is and there is also a change, I think, in the public awareness and also in the perception of government officials regarding how resources are allocated, I mean, from a gender perspective. So, I mean, I'm very proud of this accomplishment, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Sure. But just comparable to the United States, like we were talking about before, we don't have anything like that at all. So I think that that's pretty remarkable and definitely a really good first step into being able to address these inequalities.
Yeah.
So, since you mentioned COVID, did you want to go ahead and talk about the impact on women in Israel regarding COVID specifically? And I know you have some visuals that you can share with us if you want to.
Yeah, I'll try to share it. I just want to say the COVID-19 pandemic met an existing social and economic gender inequalities. Even before the crisis, men and women held different positions in the economy and in the labor market. On the average, women earn less than men. They are more engaged in unpaid care work, and they occupy more part-time jobs. I guess it's the same at the States, right?
Sure.
They're also more dependent on a social welfare system. So this crisis threatened to roll back gains in gender equality and widening gender gaps that are still persist despite years of progress. So what we do together with the Van Leer Institute,
which we have funded them in the past as well.
Okay. So we are trying to follow it's a shared project, and we are trying to follow the implications of the pandemic on women's lives in Israel on different aspects. And we published the first data presentation on July after the first lockdown, and the second one on October during the second lockdown. And we plan another update on December, and maybe an annual report on March. And the documents, I mean, we used them, they were widely spread, and we found out that being simple and friendly, and I definitely would like to show them to you, they are very useful for women's organizations, for activists, for Knesset members, for journalists and academics. Okay, so I try to share one of them, the latest one, and then just I talk about, maybe I give you some highlights.
Sure. I want to point out for everyone who is watching, if you have any questions about anything during this conversation, please use the Q&A feature and submit your questions, and we will be happy to address them.
Okay, share. Where is it? No. Here it is. No, not this one. Okay, so this is the presentation. We call it Hidden Figures after the movie. Just a second. Can you see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. So
now I can only see half of it though.
Oh, you just see half of it. Okay, let's try.
Yep, now I can see the full screen.
No, but still I have a problem to see it. I don't know why. Just a second. Okay, now you see it?
I can only see about half of it.
Okay. I don't know why. And now?
Now it looks, well, it's sort of frozen, but it looks like you're minimizing it.
Oh, okay, again. No, I have a problem with the Zoom. Okay, just a second, I'll try again. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, I can't see it now. Okay, maybe I start with the highlights and then I show you it's just the time is important more than the presentation, I guess. So sure. I start with the highlights and then I can send it to you and you can see it by yourself.
Okay.
Again, I can see you. Okay, so just a few highlights from the paper. In Israel, like in any other country, I think the coronavirus increased the risks for women in their own homes. Since the beginning of the crisis, there is an increase in domestic violence files opened by the police, and with the numbers of complaints registered at the social services hotlines. So this is one very severe implication. More women than men found themselves themselves out of work. In fact, the second lockdown, women comprised 70% of employees that were sent home to unpaid leave for the second time or more. Okay, many of them young women. We also found that low-wage earners were the hardest hit, and women in normal times constitute the majority of low-wage earners, especially Arab women and ultra-Orthodox women. We found out that in two-parent families, women do 61% of housework and 64% of childcare. And these figures didn't change at all since March. I mean, these figures are for June and they didn't change since March. So in fact, men did not increase their share of this tax since the beginning of the crisis. I mean, nothing has changed, even though we were expecting for a change. And we know that when school schedules are disrupted, mostly women reduce their paid work to care for children and assist them with long distance learning. So this is part of the problem. Another thing that I really love that we focused on is the fact that women are the majority of workers the majority of workers in the public systems that are essential for coping with the crisis. Women constitute 72% of healthcare workers. Furthermore, the pandemic exposed the gap between being an essential worker and the pay you get. I mean, many of the essential workers are the ones who earn the least. And for example, social workers, nursing, care workers, laboratory technicians, they get really low wages. So this is one of the things I think we help in raise the awareness. I mean, the issue of who are the essential workers, not only to cope with the health implications, but also to cope with the economic implications. Women also the majority among teachers and childcare workers, meaning that they are essential for the restart of the economy. We can run the economy without them. And of course, we found that women are underrepresented in decision-making positions. I don't think it's special in Israel, but it is important to say, though, that women representation in the advisory team to the National Security Council at the beginning was 20%, and it had risen to 60% because of a wide protest of women's organizations and court petition. So at least we improved this little issue. So these are the highlights, and really maybe I will send you in the chat here the links to both of the presentation, and you can, see by yourself.
I have the presentation up right now.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe I'll just send you the other one.
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, I see it. Nice.
Okay, so any other highlights from
this is it. This is the second one. At the second one, we chose 10 policy areas that the UN recommended for states to focus on when they mainstream gender. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that it's, one of the things I want to point out for everyone who's listening is that I think that research sometimes doesn't seem, so sexy maybe as other types of projects, but I think, what's so important to focus on when we're talking about research is that, once we have this kind of research, it's disseminated to the government or to advocacy organizations who then can take the research and find ways to apply it or to advocate for better policies or, to educate the public about the realities of, what life is like for women. So
Yeah, because I think it's not only the research, it's how you use the research for a social change,
Right.
and how you present the research. And really, one of our important goals in ADVA is to make the research accessible to everyone, and we really work on it. How to make it accessible so
Mhm.
everyone can use it or can understand what is going on and how the policy influence them. Um,
Mhm.
if just for example, the COVID-19 presentations had been used by the Knesset Committee of Gender Equality, and they organized a discussion around the issue of essential professions and women in essential professions, and it was the first time that the committee discussed this issue
Mhm.
since the beginning of the corona. So I think it's not just the research; it's the way
Right.
it's the way you make it accessible to others.
No, I totally agree with you. Right. If we don't have research to show where the gaps are or what needs to be addressed, then, the people who are on the ground doing the work don't necessarily know what the best strategies are or where they should be focusing their energy. So I think the research is really important.
Yeah,
Um, so, so I'd love to get some other examples from you about gender mainstreaming. Again, that's not something that we do here in the United States. I do know that it exists in many places in Europe,
yeah.
as well as in Israel. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that and just why, examples and why it's so important.
Okay. Another example I can talk about, and again, it's an example that combine work at the national and the local level. It's the example of sports. But
Mhm.
you at the States, you have the Title IX, which had been very helpful for women to get resources. We don't have such a thing. So in 2012, we conducted for the first time a study that demonstrated discrimination in the allocation of sports budgets.
Mhm.
We showed that women and girls receive less for sports from the public coffers than men and boys.
Mhm. Is
Okay.
this on a college level or like on a city level?
In general level, I mean, youth, but also grown-ups.
Okay.
Okay, both women and girls, and boys and boys and men. So we don't have, like at the States, a college level. I
Okay.
mean, we don't have this level. It's or you play as a grown-up in
Hmm.
a professional team, or as youth.
Okay.
So in addition to this finding, we also found that criteria for the financial support give greater weight to parameters in which men have an advantage. Okay, so after a while, and after the government decision to implement gender budgeting, the Ministry of Sports showed in its budget book, if you open its budget book, you will see it, that they did a gender analysis of the allocations for sports, and they found that 77% from the budget for sports unions and sports teams went to men and boys teams. Okay, so following this work, okay, now there is again the awareness
Hmm.
has risen, but following this work, one of our projects this year is gender analysis of sports budgets of 4 unions. We're going to take a look at the basketball, soccer, volleyball, and handball, and to do a gender analysis of their budgets, and also of 2 local authorities. And this work is a cooperation with the sports ministry and a result of our ongoing efforts to implement gender perspective in every area. And I can say that at the local level, something happened at the local level as well. I mean, women's sports teams are now fighting for the right for fair public financial support. For example, the women's soccer team of Beersheba submitted a court petition of discrimination in financial support. So every one of the actions on the local level have implications on the national level, have implications on the local level, and we can see it. We can see it. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but ADVA in Hebrew, it's like a ripple. So we can see the ripple effect of these actions, of the analysis. And that's why I said before, it's not just a research. I mean,
Sure.
It's much more than this.
No, absolutely. So a question that I have, thinking about the way that Israeli society is structured, and religion plays a much bigger part in Israel than it does in the same way in the United States. And so I'm curious, how does, I guess, the religious factor impact the way that I guess women are able to have access to things, and how do you see that in terms of your research, I guess? Does that make sense? Like, do you see that there are like religious, ideas or what have you that are impacting the way that women are able to get equal access to things in the budget or, in other ways?
Well, we try always to show the different implications on different groups. I mean, and different groups are also different religious groups. For example, now we work on a very big research on Arab women and ultra-Orthodox women and Ethiopian women at the labor market. And we try to understand the perspective of the employers and the perspective of the employees. But one of the problems, because we do policy analysis and because we focus on economic issues, one of the problems, and we saw it very well now trying to follow the COVID-19 implications on different groups, is that we don't always have the data. We don't have, the formal institution not always publish disaggregated data. So it's not always easy to show the differences in the access of different groups to resources. We can show difference, for example, in we can see wage gaps between the groups. I mean, this is kind of data that we have. And so, of course, there is a religious issues that impact on access to resources.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I'm wondering, like, is there pushback from the ultra Orthodox community? I guess in terms of the implementation, once you have the research, is that ever an issue where they don't want, I don't know, women to have?
No, because in the ultra-Orthodox women work as much as non-religious women work. I mean, they are the major providers at their homes. I mean, they work more than the ultra-Orthodox men.
Because the men are studying.
Yeah. And we see major changes on the occupation that ultra-Orthodox women are now engaged with. I mean,
like in what way?
Years ago, they were only teachers, for example, and now they engage more in high-tech positions and
higher paying?
in many other levels of the labor market. So Yeah, the rejects are not from there. No.
Okay. So would you say that Orthodox women are have moved into higher paying positions than they were in, maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
Men, ultra-Orthodox
No,
men,
the Orthodox women, are they
well,
in higher paying
I
positions
think there are
now?
major changes. Yeah, it's very complicated because, of course, you always have to decide if you are going to work in a ultra-Orthodox working area or in a mixed area, working place. I mean, they have many dilemmas that
Hmm.
maybe we don't understand. But still, since they are the providers at their homes,
Right.
uh, um, there are huge changes at the last few years.
Hmm. Yeah.
Also, in their education, in their higher education, I mean, we see um, new trends on these issues,
Hmm.
definitely.
So looking at maybe some other subgroups, women is obviously a broad category, right? And
Yeah.
within Israel, there are, subgroups, women on the periphery.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to know, I guess, through your research, like what you found in terms of how other factors may impact women, whether it's race or socioeconomic status.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the group. But if we take, for example, the Arab women, we know that for years the government did not invest in infrastructures, and that harmed the Arab women and their possibilities to access the labor market. I mean, if for years there was not a public bus line that got into the Arab localities, so it is impact
Hmm.
directly Arab women because their families are usually not wealthy one, and they use one car, and when they have one car the men usually take it, so if there is no bus line it's very
Hmm.
hard to get to work. It's the same about daycares. If there is not enough daycares for children, um, what should we do? I mean, so
Hmm.
I think the main problem with the employment of the Arab women is years of um, years of uninvestment. I mean, years of the government didn't invest in the
Hmm.
Arab localities for years. And we can see changes on
Hmm.
this too, because the government understand that if you want to see um, more women in the labor market, she has to invest.
Right.
I mean, she has to invest not only in public transport and in daycares, but also um, um, in developing jobs
Hmm.
um, and employment areas around the Arab localities as well, not only around Jewish localities. So
Hmm.
this is one problem, and it's a problem that combine being an Arab locality and being at the periphery of Israel. I mean, it's come together. I mean,
Hmm.
um,
Sure. So another organization that we fund, actually the next Impact Tuesday that we have in 2 weeks, is a project that's focused on Ethiopian women.
yeah.
So it's a program to train them to be nurses. And so I guess I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about Ethiopian women and maybe, why there would be an organization that would focus specifically on that population in Israel.
From what we saw in our research, and we did a focus group with Ethiopian women, and in their case, one of the major problems is racism. Definitely, I can say it. I mean, I can be more. I don't know. This is what it is. Okay,
Sure.
many of them say that once employer looks at you, it thinks that you probably the cleaner, even if you have, I don't know, a degree in engineering. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think this is the major problem. I don't know what organization you're going to
La OFEC.
fight. Not OFEC. I'm not sure I know them. Okay. So this is one of the major problems, I think,
Mm-hmm.
of the Ethiopian community. Also for the men, for the Ethiopian men, but definitely for the women. And there are gaps. I mean, the older women have a problem sometimes with the language. They less educated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they found this. They find themselves at work as actually as cleaners and
Right.
etc. But the younger generation, some of them went to university, got a degree, and still it's very hard for them to find
Mm-hmm.
something appropriate to their education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is
So,
something we have to fight. I mean, this is a big problem. We have to find a way to fight these stereotypes and racism.
sure. Sure. So, yeah, so you've been with ADVA, you said, for 16 years.
16 years, yeah.
So it's a fairly long period of time.
Yeah.
You must have been very young when you started. Um, so over the course of that 16 years, would you say that you've seen improvements for women in Israel society? I mean, what would you say overall over that 16 years, I guess you've seen in terms of progress, or maybe not seeing progress?
Oh, that's a hard question and complicated answer as well. I mean, in some issues we can see improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when we take a look at the higher education system, um, I think there are improvements. More women are now engaged with study areas they didn't engage with before. I mean, and we see improvements. Okay, I think there is at least at the government more awareness to
Mm-hmm.
issues of gender equality, and also at the public awareness. But still, gender equality is like it's like, well, Barbara is the former CEO of ADVA
Mm-hmm.
Center, and she established ADVA Center, and she always says that gender equality and feminist work is a marathon. I mean, you run for a long distance, you see improvements, but there are always chances for backlash, right? We see it now with the Corona crisis. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so we should never take our gains, okay, for granted, and we have to keep watching, and we have to keep working, and continue to do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some gains, but we have to watch them, and we still have lots of work to do. So
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's probably true for women everywhere.
yeah, you can, if we take a look, I started my work at the past 16 years ago, and for the last years, we're following the gender pay gaps, for example. And we can see that they persist. They persist for a long time. I mean, there is hardly a reduction in the gaps for the last 10 years. So what
Mm-hmm.
can I say? I mean, after such a long work and such a long time
Mm-hmm.
work on issues of women in the labor market, gender pay gaps still persist, and
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say to someone who says that the gender wage gap is not not a real thing. Because I have heard pushback. I don't know if you hear that too in Israel, but
Yeah.
that it's not, you're not looking at comparable education, or you're not looking at comparable positions or things like that. So what's your response to that?
Well, the gender pay gaps, they're my answer is the gender pay gaps are the result of much more um, they are the result of um, of problems in the labor market and the division of labor between women and men at the labor market and the family.
Mm-hmm.
And when we take a look at the labor market, we see it is very segregated. I mean, gender segregated. Women do women are overrepresented in occupation like occupations like care work and teaching, etc. And men overrepresented at different occupations, and the pay gaps are consequences of this segregation. This is a major problem of the labor market, and a major problem of the gender pay gaps. We can never take a look at the same job exactly with the same education level and the same workplace, because we can always find something that is not exactly the same, right? So the problem is really what women do and what men do in the labor market, and how much we pay for it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, why women that engage in care work get such a low wage? I mean, we have to think about it. I mean, they contribute not less than a man that is an engineer, I don't know, or something like this.
Sure.
Okay? So this is the major problem.
Mm-hmm.
This is the basis for the gender pay gaps.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think.
Do you think that it's a fair statement to say that because women occupy these positions disproportionately to men, that is a big contributor to why they're getting paid less? Because just, I guess, sexism, like, because it's just women's work, right?
Yeah.
That it's just devalued, and therefore they get paid less.
I think that is the problem. I mean, the fact that women do these works, and the fact that these works are perceived like works that you don't need any special abilities and education, and it's very much like the work women do anyway at their homes, taking care of their family members.
Right.
That's part of the problem. That's part
Mm-hmm.
of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
So I'm interested to know, so a lot of the work that that you focus on and ADVA focuses on, I guess, as it relates to gender, is on like economic issues.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I guess why is that one of the focus of the work? Like, why economic as opposed to something else?
Well, it's not as opposed to something else, because it's well connected to social issues. I mean, you can't separate the economy from the society. Any economic decision impact different groups in the society. And the ADVA Center was the first to take a look at the budget in general, not just from a gender perspective, but in general, to take a look at the budget, at the government budget, and try to make it simple for the citizens, for the residents, and make it accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So they would be able to understand how exactly it is going to impact their lives. And when we're not, none of us is an economist. Okay, I have to say it. We are all sociologists because we know how to talk about the economy with a contact to other policy areas and
Mhm.
public policy. For example, issues of healthcare or issues of social welfare. I mean, we might look at it through the economic decisions, but
Mhm.
it impact on the different areas.
Right. So you would say that economic issues are foundational really to all other issues.
And yeah, I think it's very. I think you cannot separate them from other issues, and that's why I mean that's what I love in the idea of gender budgeting, because you take a look at the budget line and you understand how exactly the budget is being divided between women and men, but then you ask yourself, why is it? And what are the needs of the people? So you're not really deal with the budget afterwards. You deal with their needs and how the policy can meet their needs.
Hmm.
But the budget, it is just a tool to explore it.
Sure. Sure. And there are real long-term issues that you look at as well, right? Like looking at women with in part-time work or in these low-paying jobs, it affects their ability like to retire, right?
Right. Mhm.
And how they can take care of themselves as they get older,
Right. Right.
right? And we see that, and it's different for men, you would say, right, in Israel, like because of these other issues.
If there is an inequality during the life course at the labor market while you work, I mean, so of course there are going to be gaps when you retire. Um, and then again, we are going back to the question of who who does the major of the who does the main unpaid care work, okay, and how is it impact the ability of women um, to uh, to earn
Mhm.
more, and to be independent or to be economically independent when they retire. Um, and this is a fundamental question.
Mhm.
When
Sure.
when we talk about women and men and work and women and men and division of work, this is a fundamental question.
Right. Right. And we see, economic security is also a big part of violence, right? Domestic violence and women's ability to be in a better situation and not have to stay with someone, right, who is abusing them because they don't have any other options financially.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, I think the research that you do is really important. So,
Thank you.
and I just wanted to kind of connect those things because I think that sometimes it's not so obvious how um, the financial component has such an effect on so many other areas of women's lives.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So we have just about a few minutes left. So yeah, is there anything that you want, just to highlight that we didn't cover already about ADVA or about, the work that you're doing with gender?
Mm, I think we covered, I don't know, many things in 1 hour.
I think so
And
too.
yeah, I think we probably covered lots of things. Um,
Okay, well, good.
Unless you have some more questions, or maybe.
Yeah, I also think that we covered a lot. I hope that everyone who was watching or listening has a better idea of what, gender mainstreaming is and what it means to do analysis of things like, budgets and, transportation schedules and things like that. So we'll go ahead and just wrap up today's Impact Tuesday. So thank you again so much for joining us from Israel. I don't know what time it is there. Evening time?
almost 6 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for taking time out of your evening to be
Thank
with
you for
us
inviting me.
today.
Thanks.
And continue updating us on all of your excellent work.
Okay, I will.
Yes, and we will be happy to share it with our trustees and other people in the community. And thank you to everyone who joined us for another Impact Tuesday. As always, I like to remind everyone that we're supported 100% by individual donations. And we always encourage people, if they can, to support our work by making a donation through our website or by calling our office. And I look forward to seeing everyone in another 2 weeks. We will have another Israeli grantee. And I hope everyone is healthy and stays well. And we will see you soon. Thank you.